Hey, everybody. Welcome back to this episode of Think Business Live. Looking forward to talking with Paul Angott, president of Innovative Billboards. He's an entrepreneur and an inventor. And Paul, I've been really looking forward to talking with you because, I love talking to inventors, right? And there are so many, especially in a world where so many people have ideas, but taking something from idea to actually inventing it has always been intriguing to me. So welcome. I appreciate you taking time to talk with me. Before we get started kind of talking about Innovative Billboards, I really want to talk to Paul, the inventor. How does an inventor become an inventor?
It's been something I've been doing for 40 years. Typically, my philosophy is you win in a marketplace. So I look at a market need. My first invention was a clock thermostat. That was in the 70s when energy prices were a concern, and it automatically dialed your thermostat down at night and up in the morning. And I just knew there was a huge need for it because you'd save money. I invented a belt drive ceiling fan that reduced costs on these overhead 52-inch ceiling fans. Grew a company from 200 grand to 6 million in sales in a year. Then I invented wireless doorbells and door chimes, and I just saw a need. I had a remote control for a ceiling fan, being in the ceiling fan business. Typically, John, it's as I say, it's a matter of identifying usually a large market need. Typically, a good rule of thumb is at least $1 billion market. Actually, on the wireless doorbells and door chimes, it maybe wasn't necessarily $1 billion market, but we sold 10 million of them. So. Yeah. When I first started with Home Depot, they had 11 stores, and we grew it, and now they have 2,000 stores. And so, again, I identify a need, then I start developing the product, and then I do something that a lot of companies don't do. I look at cost in parallel with design, and then I had I've had some products that haven't made it to the market too. I had an unmanned commercial lawnmower, a breast cancer tester, and then now we're working on an outdoor scrolling billboard that competes with LED billboards. So it's typically I look at the market need and then work backwards from there.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about, Paul, because you're talking about looking at the market need, what the pain is, the market cap of a business, and can you make money doing it? I was about maybe a year ago. I was down at Benzinga. They had Mr. Wonderful come and speak. So I wanted to hear him speak. And so we had a couple people stand up, real time, pitch him a business idea. And one of them, they both were unbelievably well spoken. But, his biggest question was, can you make money on that? And one of them, you could. The other one, you couldn't. And so I think a lot of times this is where people get frozen, right? If I invent something and I take an idea and I move it, there's no guarantees in life, but how do you know if it's really going to make money, right? And so how do you then have the courage to get started?
Well, John, as I've said before, what I do is I have a vetting process that I do. I look at the size of the market. The key thing, what you're talking about, is the value proposition. It's will people buy it, and then is it profitable? And a lot of times what I find is that you don't have the margins. For example, typically on a consumer product, you need a 4-to-1 margin between manufacturing cost and retail, just the way it works, because, by the time you have your markup and then the retailer and you have your cost of goods sold, which is, the cost stuff will be the factory. And then you have distribution costs, and you have to factor in that, you have inventory and receivables and so forth when you really run a business. So I've actually, as opposed to being an inventor, I'm more of an entrepreneur because I've started 6 companies. So you have to look at every aspect of that, just cost, the selling cost, the distribution channel, the volume, and all that. And in fact, I used to teach a course called "I've Got This Great Invention. Now What Do I Do?" Now that was more for licensing products, which is what I typically.
Wait, what? That was the name of your course?
The name of the course was "I've Got This Great Invention. Now What Do I Do?" And I taught that at Oakland University. It was 12 weeks, 3 hours a night every other week. So I had about 18 class hours, and I taught that a few semesters. And I've worked with hundreds of inventors. Typically, though, what I find is that an inventor will, if he's an engineer, he'll focus on the engineering aspect, and then I'll come back and say, let's look at the market, and then 2 weeks later, he'll come back and say, oh, I improved the design. I say, yeah, but let's look at the market. And marketing people, conversely, will look at the market, and they won't look at the engineering or design. So you have to have that balance between marketing, sales, engineering, cost, manufacturing, quality control, and so forth. And the big thing is, I've raised a lot of money in my career, and you got to look at the return for investors as well.
Yeah. Return on investors. I want to talk on that, but first I want to talk about, surrounding yourself with mentors and people based on something you just said. When you're inventing something and you're about to take it to market, how do you surround yourself, and what types of mentors do you surround yourselves with to make sure that, you're getting the questions answered? And, that's a process. I think of all those people in your class, right? I've got this invention. Now what do I do? They're looking at you as a mentor. And then I would think everybody in the room that's talking becomes kind of like the pop-up mentor to help all of these inventors get to the next, stuck/unstuck.
I have always had an ability to find just the best of the best. So I will focus my time on really excellent people, much smarter than me. And I tend to be creative. But like, for example, right now on the Billboard, we have a half dozen PhDs. On the breast cancer project, we had 8 or 10 PhDs. And on the unmanned lawnmower, different PhDs. We had, on the technical side, we had PhDs, and then I find other people that have, either raised money or been incredibly successful in various endeavors. So I've sought out the best of the best. We have an outstanding law firm with one of the best, legal firms. We use BDO, one of the top 5 accounting firms. Andy Zaleski's done a great job. We use an excellent, firms for engineering, design, development, marketing and sales, distribution, and so forth. So a lot of times I will network or figure something out, and I'll find the best of the best. And so a lot of times I will find the right person, the right expertise. It might be a very narrow field of expertise, but I will find the best person, because products will fail because one little thing failed.
Right.
So you got to cover the bases in each part of the business.
Right. It's interesting. You're talking about an invention. One little thing goes wrong and the whole thing can fail. I see that in companies that I coach all the time too. It's about just constantly being, having effective communication and talking. Because if one thing goes wrong, it has so many tentacles and so many other things that can go wrong. And I think people underestimate that, Paul. And so they look at things as an expense instead of an investment. Not that looking at the P&Ls isn't important, but I love how you're talking about getting the best of the best, because I would imagine that when investors come to you, right, because you talked about raising money and looking at ROI, when investors come to you, they want to hear about not just you and your invention and the idea, but the bench of people that are actually helping create the invention.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of it's about your team. If with Innovative Billboards right now, if you look at the people on our website, we probably have 12 or 15, and we have. In fact, I wrote to one this morning that's an owner, and I asked him about being on our website. And he's a PhD. He was an early on PhD. We worked together a lot. So yeah, and you do have to look at every aspect of the business. Design is a key aspect, but design, development, manufacturing, quality control, and then also on the marketing side, it's marketing and sales and distribution, and accounting. You have receivables and inventory. So you have to look at every aspect of the business, and frankly, you have to work hard at it, and you got to be committed. And again, strive for every aspect. It's a balance. And a lot of times what I find is I'll find an inventor, and he might be good with design, but he knows nothing about marketing and sales. Or conversely, you'll get a marketing and sales person that really doesn't understand the design aspect of the business. So it's a blend.
Yeah.
And you got to put together a great team,
Right.
if you want to be successful. And
Yeah.
I guess I've been lucky my whole life in putting together great teams of people. And we've failed sometimes too. I mean, we've had ups and downs. It's they haven't been all. Every project hasn't been a success for various reasons.
Yeah. Listen, if you're always batting 1,000 and you're never making a mistake, you're not working hard enough.
Yeah, and everyone. You look at Henry Ford. I mean, he had tons of failures, and Elon Musk recently, he's successful. He's had failures. I mean, that's by definition, you just do.
Yeah. It's part of business, and yet you still have a smile on your face, and you keep on going. I do have a question. There's, you mentioned earlier, I love the name of your class. Like, I've got this invention. Now what do I do? It just reminds me of, like, when people say, "Oh my God, I thought of that, and had I done something with that, I would have been I'd be a billionaire right now." Mm-hmm. And so, with that, a lot of and I just want to kind of roll that into a thought where, you're talking about you're creative, which means, you're creative. And so you have the art and the science of an idea, which is what you're talking about as far as building a team together. And so, and the key, I think one of the big differentiators for really, any business, any person, is execution. And so you're talking about, hey, the person who's driving in their car and sees something and says, "Oh my God, I thought of that. Da-da-da-da." But then you back that up, you got the team, the art, the science, right? And then there's just consistent grinding it out, execution to bring something to life. And so my question to you is, from an execution standpoint, from a resilience standpoint, from a persistence standpoint, and all of those things compound over time to continually build and grow the business, how do you keep on executing day in and day out when you're an inventor and you're trying to convince people why something is as great as it is?
I guess in my case, perseverance is one of my strong suits. And I just work away at stuff. And a lot of times what you don't see are the 10 products, that I've rejected for various reasons, because of cost or market or viability, the value proposition, and so forth. I mean, as I said, I have 40 patents, and I've sold over $100 million of products I've patented, but I have looked at a lot of other products that we haven't pursued, and some of the products that we did develop didn't make it to the market. I mean, for various reasons, whether it's cost or timing, or, a couple cases we ran out of money in the project. I mean, typically raising money is the biggest hurdle you have. Now, in my case, over the years, I've raised $30 million from angels, and it's a fair amount of money, but sometimes some of the projects haven't worked, and it's just the way it's been. And not due to lack of driver perseverance or team, just weird things happen. I mean, things that you don't anticipate everything. That's just, as I said, if you look at every successful guy, Henry Ford, for example, is a good example. He had failures along the way. There's an interesting thing, John, that I find when I've been in San Francisco and Silicon Valley and looked at the big VCs out there. When you've had there, you have to have failures and bounce back, and you're a hero. In the Detroit market, a lot of times if you have a failure, people say, "Oh, you've failed. That's terrible." And it's a non-sophisticated market in terms of angels. And I tell my angels up front, "Hey, look, it's high risk, high reward." The angels look for, typically, by the way, a 10-to-1 return in 5 years. And it's a good, rule of thumb. And they want a reasonable chance that they could get I tell inventors that if you're going after money on a project, that's what they're looking for. And you got to show that in numbers and projections and back that up. It's not just words, but you got to have the projections on paper to support that.
I was listening, I can't remember if I read this in a book or heard it on a podcast. I just can't remember everything sometimes that I pick up, but there was this story about this investor, and he got $10 million from this one group, and the idea went belly up. And so he had another invention, and he didn't go to that $10 million investor because he was embarrassed. He didn't want to, he had just lost all the money. And so the investor calls him and says, "What's going on? I heard, blah, 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 blah." And he said, "Oh, well, I wasn't sure." He goes, "Wasn't sure? I just invested 10 million in your brain. Like, now you know what not to do. Of course I want to invest in you again." Right. And so to your high risk, high reward, I think I would venture to guess that your investor would be somebody who really understands, the twists and the turns of something pioneering.
That goes both ways, John. I have in the Billboard project, we're raising money, and I've raised a fair amount of money. And some of my investors have invested in other projects, and some don't. Again, it depends. It just depends on the investor. As I say, I find in general, Michigan is a relatively non-sophisticated market. That is generally true with investors in California, New York, Chicago, Cleveland, even more sophisticated markets for investing. I find that the Midwest is very conservative and not as progressive in terms of angel investors, because I've raised money both around the country and actually in some cases around the world. I've had investors in India, for example. So it just varies. I mean, sometimes, yes, you'll get investors that will invest again, and sometimes you won't. It just
depends.
I can't generalize, but I've seen both.
I got it. Well, here's a shout out to Michigan to raise their level of sophistication when it comes to working with an inventor. So Paul, you have this invention. I've been talking to kind of Paul the inventor. Now let's talk to Paul the entrepreneur and the business owner of Innovative Billboards, right? So you've got this product. Explain to everybody what the product is.
Currently, we're developing a new outdoor scrolling billboard. It's mechanical, so it's 14 feet tall, 48 feet wide. It's all steel, has an acrylic front, and they're long tubes on the inside that scroll down, much like a window shade, and we hold up to 12 different ads. So the billboard competes with LED billboards. I was just driving down the road about 5 years ago, and I thought, wow, I see all these LED billboards, and I knew they're incredibly expensive. I had been in a factory in China once 30 years ago, and I saw them building LED billboards, and I knew they were expensive, and I know they gobble up electricity. And I had worked on a mechanical project, and so I just started sketching up ideas, and I realized there's a huge market. So basically, what happens is that when you have a typical static billboard, it'll generate about $2,500 every 4 weeks. When you go with an LED, you'll get 6 customers at $2,000 a month, or $2,000 each, so 12 grand. So you go from 2,500 to 12 grand every 4 weeks for revenue, or 33 grand, 156 grand a year. But when you look at the expenses, because I went online and I looked for the major billboard companies, and I looked at their SG&A and so forth. So that's costs, expenses, overhead, and profit. Well, the profit in round numbers jumped to about from 3 grand to 30 grand between a static and an LED. But when you consider it's 150 to 350 grand cost, even at the lowest end cost, it's about, by the time you factor in freight and installation, it's about a 5.5 year payback. Our billboard is a 1.5 year payback, and all the billboard companies we talked to said they wanted payback in 2 years or less. And as a result, static billboards are 96% of the market, and LED is only 4% of the market, and we're going after that 96%. So we have a huge opportunity because we're 1/3 the cost of an LED billboard and 1/6 the electricity cost. And there's 115,000 static 14 by 48 foot billboards in the U.S. So it's a $6 billion market in the U.S., 16 billion around the world. Wow. And I mentioned early on, I said, you need to go after, oftentimes, large market segments.
Yeah. And how is you've got a really cool business. And how is, now that we're sitting here talking July 3rd, have a great 4th, by the way, weekend. And,
you too, John.
Thank you, Paul. And how has COVID affected your business, and how are you walking through that?
Yeah, COVID slowed us down because we use some professors at Oakland University, and they find that it's taken them a lot more time when they're teaching online versus teaching in the classroom. So we've had less of their time, and also, we can't. We have a working quarter scope prototype. We can't get in to see it. We just found yesterday we can now get in, but we weren't able to work on it, so that slowed us down. And also, we have a Zoom call every day with our key four. There's four of us that, we have about a dozen people that we work with on a consulting basis, but we have 6 full-time, essentially full-time. Our top 4 meet every day at 2 on Zoom. But, it's different when you're doing design over the phone, and granted, you can share drawings and so forth, but it's nice to have that in-person meetings that we would meet. So it slowed us down. It's probably cost us a lot. And then also, I couldn't raise money during that time. Fortunately, we had a good fourth quarter, and then recently my owners decided to invest more. So we've had in the last couple of weeks, but it's definitely slowed us down. It probably cost us effectively 3 months. There's other delays, but it slowed us down.
And everybody, right? Everybody's been kind of feeling that 3-month slowdown, and then it seems like things are starting to pick up a little bit. And you talk about something I just want to kind of highlight for a minute. The consistency of your team Zoom meetings. I think through this time, the consistency of talking and communicating, effectively communicating, holding each other accountable, is having empathy for, like you're talking about, the professors having to take more time, and just grateful to have the team together, I think is so important. So, but I think that's an important evergreen message to keep those going. So let me ask you a couple questions, to the inventors out there, right? To the inventors who are in a corporate job, can't leave, have a side inventor hustle. How does someone, keep their inventor spirit alive?
Well, typically you start with a value proposition. I've got other products I haven't pursued for various reasons. I have an app for your cell phone that blocks texting while driving.
Yeah.
And we actually have a working prototype, but I didn't pursue it because I'm pursuing the Billboard. I have an automatic pothole filter. The governor likes it, for example. But you have to pick a product and stay focused, and just work away at it and find people that can help you with, whether it's the design or cost or manufacturing cost. Go online, talk to a bunch of people, see if it'll really sell in the marketplace, and then pursue it. If someone has a specific question, they can call me. I've helped hundreds of investors, and inventors. I don't charge. I have one rule. I said, if you follow my rules, I'll help you. But typically what I find is someone says, hey, Paul, that's great. Can I ask for help? And I say, sure. Yeah. And then they come in it's an engineering guy, and he comes in with a product idea. And I said, oh, that's great. Let's look at the market. And 2 weeks later, he says, oh, I worked on the engineering. And I said, well, how about the market? And he said, oh, well, I haven't got to that yet. And I said, well, so then he comes back 2 weeks later, same thing. And then he doesn't look at the market or the value proposition or cost or a different aspect. And you got to be balanced. So
balanced. Well said. And I think one of the key things you're talking about is actually asking for help and getting it out of your head and start talking about it, making it something physical, ask for help, and start building those team of resources that are key. And so, Paul, how can people get a hold of you if they want to, get a hold of you? Here's your website, innovativebillboards.com. Do you have anything else? Your cell, your email, anything you want to give them?
My cell is 248-444-1492, the year Columbus discovered America.
Okay. So let me ask you a couple of questions in closing. So it's July 3rd, it's July 4th weekend, 2020. kids graduating college recently are graduating in a different world than they thought they were going to be 3-4 months ago. What piece of advice would you give somebody who just graduated college?
Well, if you want to pursue your own business, you have to work hard at it and read about it, find people that have experience. My dad always said, you can't buy experience, so cash in on someone else's. And
that's
you can't do
it. Say that
What's
again.
that?
You can't buy experience, so cash in on somebody else's?
Yes, exactly. And I do that a lot. I find experts, on the Billboard, Dr. Gu and Dr. Latch and, and Dr. Abed and Dr. Various people. They're great in the design aspect. And then we went out in the marketplace, and my partner knows, the Billboard company. So we talked to the largest Billboard companies. They love the product. And then, you talk to the experts and you bounce it off people, and then, but you got to pursue it aggressively and set goals and objectives.
Yeah.
Write a game plan and then execute it.
I love it. Paul, in closing, it's July 4th weekend and people are unplugging.
Sure.
And so when it comes to, those people because you talked a lot about mentorship today, you talked a lot about building the right team. This is a weekend I think people are kind of saying, hey, I'm putting everything on hold until, next week. But one thing I think they should be thinking about is the power of mentorship. I'm a big believer that everybody should have at least 3 mentors in their lives, because you need those people to help you evolve and grow, especially in a world that we're living in today, which is, kind of everybody's building their new playbook. And so as people are kind of thinking over July 4th weekend or whenever they're listening to this over the next, whenever, how should they be thinking about the types of mentors that they have in their life?
Well, first off, I think in anything in life, I think you need a balance. So if you're, if you got a good job and you're, I think there's balance in life, and occasionally I get out of balance. I might work too much, but you do have to look for that balance, and you have to find set goals in your life, or what you want to do with your life in terms of job, career, can be family. I think family is extremely important. Family comes first to me.
Yeah.
I've always felt my family comes in front of everything, family and friends. Frankly, I think family and friends are more important than the business, but I work hard at the business, but or church or your spiritual background. And then, but when you're looking at it from a professional or from a career standpoint, I think you have to start with goals and objectives, and you have to have written goals and objectives. I do a to-do list every day, and I define goals in my life, and I update them fairly often. And then I find a lot of people that can help. I have a board of directors that's, at the Billboard company, and, good numbers and so forth. So
good. Well, Paul, I can't thank you enough. Thanks so much for taking time to share your wisdom, talk about innovative billboards, talk about your mind as an inventor, and then and just inspiring other people to really tap into their potential and the ideas, in their brains and in their body. We all watch Shark Tank and we think, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? Or I had that idea, or this and the other. And so I think being an inventor is an amazing thing. You help the world be a better place by just infusing ideas that go from just a seed planted to growing into a real business. And it's inspiring to see, and it's inspiring to watch, and it's inspiring to hear. So thank you very much, Paul, and have a great 4th with you and your family, and appreciate your time.
You too, John. Thanks. Good to talk to you as usual. Have a super 4th, and we're heading up to our cottage with the family and with sharing it with my brother and sister and his kids. So, yeah, have a great weekend. Good to talk to you, John.
You
Thanks
too,
much.
Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.